Indonesia asked a Silicon Valley founder to modernize its public school system. Now state prosecutors want to send him to prison for 18 years. Nadiem Makarim's trial in Jakarta is not a routine case of a politician filling their pockets with public funds. It is something more revealing. A structural clash between two entirely incompatible worlds. High-velocity tech innovation on one side, and a state bureaucracy built on rigid hierarchy, absolute precedent, and defensive compliance on the other. Can a developing nation build a modern digital economy when its legal system is designed to preserve administrative inertia? Act 1. The Jakarta docket and the price of speed. Inside the anti-corruption court in Jakarta, the visual contrast is complete. Stacks of yellowing paper procurement folders rest next to a defendant with a Harvard Business School degree. Makarim was brought into government to break bureaucratic gridlock. He was tasked with modernizing an underperforming educational framework that serves over 270 million people. But the exact traits that made him a successful technology entrepreneur are now being used as evidence against him. His impatience with bottlenecks, his flat management structures, his use of agile teams, all of it reinterpreted by prosecutors as administrative violations. Before entering public service in 2019, Makarim built Gojek into a $10 billion regional ride-hailing and digital services powerhouse. He understood how to scale software and bypass legacy bottlenecks across thousands of islands. Former President Joko Widodo wanted that specific private sector speed injected directly into the ministry. But institutional resistance runs deep inside the civil service. Under the current administration of President Prabowo Subianto, that resistance has been formalized through criminal prosecution. The state actively demands modern corporate efficiency from its reformers. Then its legal machinery criminalizes the exact methods required to deliver it. This dynamic creates a severe institutional risk premium across the region. When the state treats operational agility as a criminal offense, talented private sector leaders think twice before entering public service. The message from the Jakarta courtroom travels far beyond Indonesia. It reaches software engineers in Kuala Lumpur and public administrators in Manila. If you enter government to disrupt failing systems, the system may eventually use its courts to break you. For the middle class watching this play out, public service shifts from a prestigious civic contribution to an incredibly dangerous career choice. Exit 2. The Chromebook logic and the centralization trap. The core of the state prosecution focuses on a massive pandemic-era initiative executed between 2019 and 2023. To stop severe learning loss during global lockdowns and enable standardized online testing, the ministry purchased over 1.1 million Google Chromebook laptops, projectors, and modems. This hardware reached more than 77,000 schools scattered across the Indonesian archipelago. The total program value reached 9.9 trillion rupiah, which is roughly $601 million. Central ministerial budgets covered part of the cost. Local provincial allocation funds covered the rest. The state alleges a corrupt quid pro quo behind this technology choice. Because Alphabet Incorporated's Google was an early venture capital investor in Gojek, prosecutors argue that selecting Chrome OS was a deliberate policy designed to enrich Makarim's former commercial partner. The prosecution claims this tech choice resulted in illegal personal gain of 809.59 billion rupiah, roughly $46 million. They also assert total state losses reached 2.18 trillion rupiah. In this legal framework, a high-level policy choice is treated identically to traditional procurement fraud. The defense countered these claims with audited financial reality. Makarim's personal net worth actually dropped by more than 50% during his time as a minister, completely undermining the narrative of personal enrichment. Former Google Asia-Pacific President Scott Beaumont also testified that the venture capital investment in Gojek had zero influence on the ministry's internal technical evaluations. Chrome OS was chosen because it saved the state trillions of rupiah compared to costlier alternative software platforms. Even former coordinating minister Mahfud MD publicly defended the policy choice, stating that prosecutors are incorrectly targeting legitimate executive decisions rather than actual budget execution fraud. XET3. The Shadow Team and the Civil Service Backlash. In September 2022, Makarim stood at a United Nations summit in New York and shared something that would set Jakarta alight. He had integrated an informal team of 400 product managers, engineers, and data scientists directly into his ministry. Back home, the backlash was immediate. Traditional political factions and conservative civil society groups demanded urgent state audits, alleging collusion and administrative overreach. The team was actually a legally contracted entity under GovTech Edu, a subsidiary of state-owned telecom designed to help career bureaucrats build digital tools quickly, but bypassing traditional bureaucratic hierarchies, was seen as an existential threat to long-standing networks of political patronage. XET4. the TaniHub precedent, and the criminalization of risk. To understand how far this structural trap extends, look at the parallel verdicts delivered on June 18, 2026 in the TaniHub investment trial. This separate case resulted in direct prison sentences for senior executives of state-backed corporate venture capital firms. Donald Y. Haja, the former chief executive of Telkom's MDI Ventures, and Niko Y. Jaya, the former chief executive of BRI Ventures, were both prosecuted under Indonesia's broad anti-corruption laws. Their crime was approving a joint $25 million venture investment into an agri-tech startup that eventually failed. The startup defaulted on its loans, lost its operating license, and entered liquidation in 2024. After the collapse, the state auditor retroactively reclassified the standard commercial business failure as a direct financial loss to the state. The judges ruled that the venture capital executives violated internal principles because their due diligence relied on data provided by the startup itself. And crucially, the court held that even though the executives did not pocket a single dollar, the legal threshold for corruption was fully met because state-linked funds had flowed into a third-party company that ultimately went bankrupt. By treating basic technology investment risk as a prosecutable criminal offense, the Indonesian judiciary has effectively outlawed state-backed venture capital. This June 2026 precedent signals to the market that any investment of state-linked funds that fails to generate a positive financial return can be retroactively targeted as graft. This completely destroys the risk-taking mandate required to build a competitive regional tech ecosystem. It tells professional investment managers that operating without permanent top-level political protection carries catastrophic personal legal consequences. Teat 5. The broken compass of legal certainty. This unpredictable environment is best understood through the recent trial of Thomas Lembong. The Harvard-educated former trade minister was convicted in July 2025 and sentenced to 4.5 years in prison for administrative errors regarding sugar import permits, despite zero evidence of personal corruption. In an extraordinary move, President Prabowo Subianto bypassed the standard judicial appeals process and granted a formal abolition of the legal proceedings in August 2020. This constitutional tool allowed the executive branch to wipe out the prosecution entirely, demonstrating how deeply politics and justice are intertwined in Indonesia today. This heavy reliance on executive intervention exposes the absence of predictable legal standards. For international fund managers, the signal is already being felt. Structural legal instability contributed to a sharp 29% decline in the Jakarta Composite Index. The rupiah depreciated by 6%, falling to around 17,720 per US dollar. When investors conclude that legal safety depends on political favors rather than institutional laws, capital leaves, and it does not wait for a verdict to do so. A presidential intervention remains a strong political possibility for Makarim given his family's long-standing ties to the political elite. But an executive pardon will not fix the underlying systemic flaw. Indonesia urgently needs to establish a clear, objective boundary that separates policy errors and commercial risk-taking from genuine financial corruption. Until that legal line is drawn, the state framework will continue to treat private sector reformers not as assets to be integrated, but as dangerous threats to be neutralized. The economic consequences of this legal environment ripple across the entire region. They create a visible institutional risk premium that affects every level of society. From the local classroom to the regional boardroom, the message lands hard. When the mechanism of law is used to punish administrative speed and commercial risk, progress slows to a crawl. The structural trap deepens, forcing a choice between safe stagnation and dangerous innovation. Think of the school teacher in Sumatra still waiting for the digital tools that administrative reform promised, tools that criminal prosecution has delayed. Consider the technology engineer in Kuala Lumpur, watching these trials unfold and deciding that public sector collaboration carries too high a personal cost. When a state criminalizes the execution of its own modernization goals, it signals that the administrative system values self-preservation far more than actual economic advancement. This is the structural trap Indonesia must resolve, or watch its digital economy ambitions stall before they arrive. I am Hiro the Hornbill, and this is the ASEAN Angle. If this episode gave you a new way of seeing the region, subscribe so you do not miss the next one. New episodes weekly, link in the description. Zamjoa!